All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's What's Up Wednesday interview session. If you're new to these, we just kind of hop on and interview quite a few different areas of the childcare industry and relate that back to our network. So today we're going to be meeting with Shannon Tucker, who's a licensed clinical social worker and addiction counselor, as she goes over all things trauma and how to handle difficult topics with young children. So hey, Shannon, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi, yes, thanks so much.
All right. So to kick us off here, tell us a little bit about you, how long you've been in this practice of the clinical social work and addiction counseling.
Yes, so I've been a private practice therapist for about 10 years. And although I'm not a child therapist, I work primarily with teens and adults. Sure. I have a lot of experience working with trauma in all ages.
Awesome. Great overview. Yeah. So talk about kind of what is trauma to start with.
Yeah, so I define trauma very broadly. So it is pretty much anything that happens to someone outside of their control that is distressing. So this could be from a car accident, an illness, even a fish dying, a pet fish. Sure, so It's up to the person who it happened to that they get to decide if it's trauma or not. And there's also risk factors and protective factors. So these play a role in how people handle trauma. So if I'm 5 and my fish dies and I have really supportive parents, lots of friends, lots of family, I might be able to handle that pretty well.
Sure.
Now, if I'm on the opposite side, if I'm 5 and I have no support, no friends, parents aren't supportive, this fish dying could be very traumatic and cause a lot more stress in my life. So those are risk factors and protective factors. And then there's also acute trauma and complex trauma. So acute trauma is a one-time event. So this could be a natural disaster, a bike accident, a death, something like that. Complex trauma is something that happens over and over again over a long period of time. So this could be my parents argue every night. I'm 8 years old and I've moved 6 times in my life, or people bully me every day at school. So both types of traumas can be intense and need dealing with, sure. But complex trauma can often shape how we view the world and really impact us in a deeper way. So again, protective roles and risk factors play a role in both complex trauma and acute trauma. So if I have my parents argue every night, which is complex trauma, but I have a really supportive sister who sleeps in bed with me and sings to me, that's going to be a protective factor. So those are kind of how trauma factors can really.
That's more diverse than I would have ever imagined. That's incredible. Okay.
Yeah.
So why is it important to talk through those hard things and traumatic situations with children as they come up?
So talking to children about trauma helps them process it. Right. And I would say by and large, children understand a lot more than we give credit to. Sure. So I would say as adults, I would not say things like, oh, they don't notice, they don't mind, they don't care, she's not listening. I would challenge adults not to do those type of things because kids really do pay attention to the world around them and they're making new connections every day. And having a safe place for kids to talk about the trauma can really, build up their emotional capacity and can really just help them learn how to deal with stressors throughout their whole life.
Yeah.
And kind of along with that, I would say why it's important is say the trauma occurs to a child. So an example would be they get in a car accident. You really want to help the child play the tape through. So what that means is let them talk about what happened. And so often kids and as well as adults, we get stuck on certain parts of the trauma. So I might, as a 5-year-old, end and say, we got hit or the sirens came, and then I just end the story there. What you want to do is acknowledge those things and help them label their feelings, like maybe that was scary, but then you want to help end the tape. So end the scene with security and safety. So then maybe we went to the hospital and you got a cast and then you went home in bed and then the next day we had pancakes. So that's where you really want to end the story so that it helps the brain process and realize the trauma's over and I'm safe now.
Completed.
Yeah. So, and the best thing to do is process this as soon as possible when a trauma happens, but really you can do this years later. So even if you have unresolved traumas, you can realize like, wow, I always stop when I get to this one part of the story. I need to end the story. And that really helps our brain process what happened fully.
Wow, that's great. Okay. Yeah. So you touched on it a little bit. So kind of what is that first step to take when talking to young children when things like this happen or scary news comes up?
Yeah, I would say even before the first step of talking about the big traumas is I would say talk about everyday things. So label, help give space for little things such as like I went down a big slide, or I was scared to jump in the pool, or it's my first day of school. So if you really help them have a safe place to talk about these little scary things, it'll build their trust in you to then want to share and talk about some bigger things. Another important step, which I kind of hit on, is adults need to process their own stuff first. So this means that like you process whatever comes up for you. So say there's another shooting, and I've had personal violence or personal experience with gun violence in my life. I would need to process that first before I then go and talk about it with my child, because I would need to know what's coming up for me.
Sure.
And it's not the child's job to help us through that. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't show empathy and emotion about it. It just means that we've done our work first to realize what triggers us so that we can be a healthy space for the kids and put their needs first in those situations.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a good tip. That's kind of separate, but definitely helps kind of develop the process and cope. So what are a few approaches or best practices to address the situation and, like you said, further that conversation for trust?
I would say really do it in a calm, direct, but age-appropriate manner. So that's going to vary for each age of the child. And choose your time wisely. So it might not be best to talk about things right before they go into school or on an empty stomach. But with that said, also take advantage of small opportunities. So if they love to talk in the car or on a walk or while they're in bed, take advantage of those times and let them kind of share what they want. Another thing that I like to think of is I saw a quote somewhere that said, kids don't know how to say they had a hard day. They ask to play. So often that's a way for kids to engage. So take that as an opportunity, and a lot of processing can occur during play as well.
Got it. Okay. So we've covered kind of what should be done and kind of best practices. So maybe switch over, maybe what should they not do or try to avoid when discussing hard topics?
Yeah. So I would say your language really does matter. So you want to honor their feelings and experience. And you don't really want to say things like, oh, you're fine. Don't worry about it. Why do you care so much? It's not scary. Instead, you're going to say things like, it's okay to cry. How do you feel? Do you have any questions? Just
safe
honor,
space.
honor their experience. Another thing would be don't label their feelings for them. So sometimes we might say, you must be so scared, when really they weren't scared, they were confused. But they're going to say that because you just said it.
Right.
Let them label it so you don't mislabel for them. Another thing is you don't want to assume that they're going to have a certain response or that they want to talk about it for a long period of time. So everyone processes different, even adults. So hopefully you've had a relationship with this child and you know them well. Right. Some kids are going to want to talk about the event or things over and over for days and months. Other children might just say, okay, and go about their business. So don't push it. That can be your stuff if you want to talk about it longer than they do. Try to let them guide that. Remember that it's your job to create a space. It's their job to take you up on it if and when they want.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So what are some resources or places people can go to in order to learn more or share out with their friends, neighbors, colleagues, or other ones, people with little ones, to ensure that that conversation does continue to happen as, unfortunately, life events continue to happen too?
Right. I would just say really look for supportive adult connections. So that could be friends, family, church, support groups. I'd say go to a therapist if you feel like that would help you.
Sure.
There's professional help. There's just support groups. So psychologytoday.com is a great resource for articles as well as finding a therapist or groups in your area. And also in the comments, there's some Instagram accounts that I really like. that show really responsive parenting and ways, little tips and information about helping kids process trauma.
Yeah, I'll include those down at the end. Yeah, thank you for that. That'll be a good kind of resource and tool to kind of refer back to. So kind of what's your advice on ensuring that the child knows that they can trust the adult to come back to as things do come up or questions or worries happen?
Yeah, I would say if you tell them that they can come to you, really make that happen. So don't just say it, you need to show it.
Right.
And so be mindful if maybe the child comes up to you and it's not a good time and you're like, ugh, mommy has to work, or I don't have time, or not right now. That's really going to make them shy away from wanting to come to you. So it might not always be convenient, but really take advantage of times when they want to talk about things, and don't turn away any opportunity.
Okay. Yeah. Is there anything else that our Early Learning Ventures kind of childcare industry network can be doing or sharing more to support this conversation kind of as things continue to happen in the world?
Yeah, I would just say really role model processing yourself. So either in adult relationships or with the child and with everyday situations.
Sure.
So often it's easy to start with the little things. So you got a boo-boo on your head from hitting your head on the table, like help them process that fully. So that when there are bigger things, you've already had practice doing these other examples. And I would just say keep creating a space for them to make sense of the world and process. Another thing would be trust your gut. So you know this child best, you know yourself best, and just always listen to your gut, and it'll really guide you with how to handle these things.
Best path there. Yeah, that's a good point too. Okay, feel free to share any and all final thoughts. We'll wrap up here today and give you the rest of your day back, but just kind of any other words of advice for our network watching today on this topic.
Yeah, I would say how kids process trauma really shapes how they view the world and people around them. Sure. So I can either start to believe as a kid that I can't trust anyone, the world's dangerous, people are scary, or I can learn the opposite. So giving kids a safe place to talk about these things and reframing anything that's not really positive and turning it into a negative can really help shape their core beliefs that we carry throughout our whole life. So it's a really good thing to just give space to these hard topics because it really helps them later in life.
Deserves the space and they can kind of proceed forward with that. Yeah, I love that. We're gonna end it there. That's a perfect way. Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, great.
All right.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. We appreciate it. We'll see everybody next week back on our What's Up Wednesday. Thanks, Shannon. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
See ya.